So we're going to show you how to be agile at adjusting go-to-market investments using real-time scenario planning supported by high-confidence data. We're going to cover two very different ways the senior executive teams make operational decisions. We're going to then Siki is going to show how modern leadership teams are doing what-if scenario planning in real time. After Siki is finished, Scott's going to walk through the go-to-market data requirements needed to support the type of planning that Siki walks through, and then at the end we'll do some Q&A, and as we go along, submit your questions, and we will get to them at the end. So if you started your fiscal year in January, you're just over halfway through the Q1, and if you started your fiscal year in February, it's still a little bit early, but either way, every one of us, we're all going to be heading into those mid-quarter board or executive leadership meetings, and everyone's going to be asking the same questions. Where are we versus plan? What's working? What's not? How are we going to get back on track or double down on what's working? And for typical companies, your executive leadership meetings or board meetings might look something like this. Before the meeting, there's this chaotic scramble to get the go-to-market performance reports together and figure out which reports to show to the board or to make things look better than they are. During the meeting, there's a review of performance to date, performance versus plan, and then often some ad hoc brainstorming session where people throw out ideas about why things aren't going according to plan, and ideas are thrown around about how to course correct, and maybe it's launching new initiatives or reallocating spend on existing initiatives. And of course, there's some discussion about how, if we change certain things, how fast can things turn around, or if we throw more gasoline on the fire, what could that look like? And usually there's wild ass guesses thrown around about potential gains and losses from any of these changes. And after the meeting, the go-to-market leaders go away and they huddle and they decide what changes are going to be implemented. And a few internal meetings, and a few weeks later, the CEO and CFO give the go-to-market leaders the green light to change course. And then finance updates the models and eventually sends out the updates to the rest of the team, and the updates to the plan and the forecast. And then they send out the updated files in Excel or Google Sheets, and there's a bunch of files thrown around, and no one's quite sure which version is which, and which version we're working off of today. It's a little bit chaotic and haphazard. I'm curious, Scott and Siki, what have you guys seen in your years as CEOs that I maybe missed here?
Yeah, I'll jump in first there. This is pretty accurate. I'm looking at the left-hand side, the bottom bullet about cherry picking reports. One of the things I've seen a lot is the different functional leaders cherry pick the reports that tell the story they want to tell. And so often during those meetings, the middle box, when their sales leader is putting up data that contradicts with the marketing leader's data, a lot of times the time of that meeting gets wasted arguing over the data, right? Rather than really saying, well, we know the data's good, now what are we going to do about it? So that's the one thing that just jumps out as I wanted to add to this, is just the incredible time sink when there's not a single data truth in the company.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think having a single source of truth is so important. And there's two types of things that you want to align on too. One is what's actually happened, and the other is, well, what are the causal drivers of the business that determine how those drivers actually impact your revenue growth. And the reality inside most companies is that the finance has an idea of how marketing drives sales, but the marketing department, they have their own model of how they drive sales, and the sales team has a different model of it. And so having a different understanding of how these things all fit together also creates misalignment, and this process becomes more of a political process than any kind of like problem-solving objective workflow, which is one of the things that makes it a lot more stressful than it needs to be.
Yeah, good points by both of you guys. All right, let's keep moving because we have a better way to share. There's a better way, and we're going to share that here. great teams do things differently. They have a better, more modern way of operating. And it kind of looks like this. Before these meetings, every leader has access to accurate go-to-market data. There's reporting that's actually designed in a way that makes it easy to find and prepare what you need. During these meetings, there's live scenario modeling going on. All the decision makers are at the table. Adjustments and key decisions can be made and decided on in real time. And then after coming out of these meetings, every department leader has a clear action item and action items that they can go and get after, and they can take those actions without delay. And this is kind of the world that we want to give insight into today. And that's why I want to pass it over to Siki, because operating like this is possible, and he's going to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing, Siki, if you want to take over control of the screen.
Great.
Excited to see what you've got.
Thank you. I'm going to just run through a few quick slides and run to a live demo of what we're doing here, Runway. But what Runway is a business planning platform designed for actual human usage. And that's the key. What we found when we talked to a lot of customers is that everyone, of course, has some kind of financial operating model. And the main problem that we've seen is that the only person who actually understands how this model works is the person made in the first place. And downstream of that truth is what leads to all of a lot of inefficiencies and dysfunction. It's hard to get visibility into your data. It's hard to keep it up to date. It's hard to make decisions off of it. And what we've seen is that as you scale, and as this team knows, scale certainly matters, the pains only grow as you get bigger. As you enter hypergrowth, they get worse for chiefly three reasons, right? One is you just have more people in your company to get information from and share context to. The other thing that is really important is, in order to make these good decisions, you have to have very good data. And as you grow, the volume of data and the sources of those data also increase, and it just becomes increasingly time consuming to even keep your model up to date. And the third thing is that business itself becomes more complex, right? You have more segments, more geographies, more departments, and all of this eventually leads to a breakage point where you need to solve for it. And so that's what we built Runway. And Runway consists of a few high-level modules, which I'll run through live. But first, it starts with this joyful modeling experience so that you and the rest of your team can actually understand how your model works. We integrate with just about everything under the sun, not just your general ledger and your HR systems and your CRM, but also your data warehouses and even your ad networks so that you can have all of your GTM data in real-time live to forecast against. You can build beautiful reports like this in a matter of seconds, share it with just the right people. And this is probably the most important thing about to show you, which is what we call plans. And so the intuition here is if you truly want to get the rest of the company engaged in the workings of the business and planning, you need to give them something that matches your mental model of the business. And generally, people don't walk around thinking about their business in the form of a big wall of numbers. The way they do think about their business in the form of a roadmap or a marketing plan. And connecting that context that usually lives outside of the spreadsheet, like in a Google Doc or a Notion, with your numbers is what we found to have unlocked a new level of accessibility and ability to collaborate with the rest of your team that's never been possible before. So that was a lot of talking. I'll just show you what a live instance of Runway looks like. So what you're looking at here is a pretty simple SaaS model. And we have 4 KPIs that you probably care about when you're running a business: cash, burn, runway, ARR. And underneath, we have 3 plans, which I'll talk about in a bit. So the first thing to understand about what you're looking at is we are not sort of a templatized tool where anything's hard-coded. It's actually closer to Excel in that you can model anything from scratch. And so this is all backed by a model. And in this case, it's a fairly simple SaaS model. And the way formulas work in Runway is they're human readable, right? So what you're used to seeing is probably something like A1 divided by C2. But in Runway, instead of every cell having a formula, every row has a formula. And what that allows you to do is have these human readable formulas like cash this month, I would burn this month. And to edit, it's really easy, just type. And it's fully dimensional. So if you have like 3 different customer segments, for example, you can just say, I want to see revenue by 3 customer segments. And now you have that. And then you can just like total that up and you can say total revenue is a sum of revenue across all customer segments. And so that's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to go ahead and discard that draft, which we'll talk about in a bit. But once you have your model in Runway, That's where the visibility and our ability to connect to all of the different sources of data in your company becomes really important. So, for example, when you look at something like our sales and marketing model, and you can see marketing spend here, where this is coming from is in real time, we support about 755 different sources of data. That includes things like your Facebook ads or your LinkedIn ads. You name it, we probably support it. And now you can just connect all of that data directly into your instance. This is a sample instance. We haven't connected that. I'll give you a quick peek into our internal instance. So all of this is coming live from different data sources. Okay, so once you have your model in, and once you connect all your sources of data, how do you make this actually accessible to other people? So one of the cool things that I mentioned before is this idea of plans. And this is something that we've invented here. It's kind of unique to us. But this is very different from a view that you have on a spreadsheet, and it bears some explaining. So on this page, we have 3 plans: a marketing plan, a product roadmap, and a Series B fundraising plan. And you notice, of course, plans have a name, they have a time, they also have an owner that you can assign. And so people are responsible for different aspects of the plan. So the world's simplest plan for this particular company is a Series B fundraising plan. If I open this up, you can kind of see what it's doing. It's saying, hey, take the role called cash in your model, and the impact of the Series B fundraising plan in August is we're going to increase cash by $12 million. That's what this does. If I click inside here, you can see that cash is like burning down, and in August it goes up by $12 million. So that's a world's simplest plan. It just gives you some idea of how plans work. But plans become really powerful when you realize you can group them and compose them. You can become roadmaps and projects. So how this can impact your go-to-market plan, for example, is if you look at our marketing plan, this has 3 sub-plans under them, and you can just like drag and drop and group them however you want. Underneath the marketing plan, you'll notice we have a spring marketing campaign, and in April, we're going to refresh ad targeting, and May, we might drop some new ad creatives from our new agency. And each of these does something different to our model. So the spring marketing campaign increases marketing spend by about $10K a month over the course of these 3 months. And April, we might refresh ad targeting in our ads, and that we think that's going to lift qualified lead conversion rate by 12%. And in May, we expect some new ad creatives to drop from our agency, and that's going to reduce our cost per lead by about $160. Again, all of these sources of data, you can connect to your real sources of data, and then you say, here's how I want to change it in the future, and here's what I'm going to do, and who's responsible for making these causal drivers better. And so you think about the same view in a typical spreadsheet view, which we also have, right? We have marketing spend here, and we have qualified lead conversion, and we have cost per lead here. The numbers are changing, and this is what you would do when you offload your assumptions. But what I'll note is the context is missing, right? Who's going to change them? What are you going to do to change them? Why is it changing? And those are some of the most important questions that give meaning to what you're going to do, so you can connect the operational plans with your real data. So once you have plans in Runway, what's really cool is it's not just nice to look at. We make it really easy for you to play with what-if scenarios and align as a team. So one of the easiest things you can do is, of course, what you want to ask a what-if question, or maybe you just want to understand what is the impact of having a spring marketing campaign at all. And if you're at head of marketing or you're in finance, even if you have something like this, in order to answer the question of the impact of the spring marketing campaign, what you would have to do is you have to make a copy of that spreadsheet, undo these changes, right? And then compare the output on how it affects cash and burn and Runway AR by hand. What's cool in Runway is if you want to understand the impact of any part of your plan, all you have to do is click on it. So if I want to understand the impact of spring marketing campaign, if I click here, this little highlighted area is the impact of the thing that I selected. So you can see that cash is going to go down, burn is going to go up, Runway remains roughly the same, but because ARR also goes up. That is that difference. If I select a different aspect of the plan, you can see the impact is smaller, or I can select this marketing plan as a whole, and it'll actually show you how all these decisions multiply upon each other for much bigger impact. So once you understand the impact of your current plans, the next thing you probably want to do is experiment with different levels of spend, right? Different scenarios. What happens in more on marketing, less on marketing? Of course, you can go to your spreadsheet view and just edit this number. That's normally how you would do it. But in Runway, you can imagine your head of sales or your head of marketing being able to click here and just like edit this number directly and see what happens, or even just drag this graph directly up and down. And the minute they make a change, we put you in a draft scenario so they're not accidentally messing up your main locked-in operating plan. So you can do a comparison and see the before and after immediately. But that's a relatively simple change, and that's not as interesting, right? So it's pretty straightforward to change a value, a scalar value in your plan. But if you consider it like this, imagine you're in a board meeting, right? And you're presenting your marketing plan to the board, and the board says, okay, this is a great plan, but I want to know what happens when we push back this marketing plan by a quarter, right? And what is notoriously really difficult to do in a spreadsheet, in any kind of spreadsheet model, is changing the timing of your decisions. Because if you think for a moment, the physical actions you would need to do, you have to find a diff of these 3 cells, and then you have to paste the diffs over here with a new formula. Then you have to paste all formulas back here, and then you have to do it for every other row that was impacted by the timing of that plan. And you're probably not going to try to do that live in a board meeting because God knows you might make a mistake or something like that. But in Runway, if you want to experiment, answer that question, you can just do this, and you're done. So this spring marketing campaign will hit in April, or you can just drag it back, or I can move this marketing plan as a whole back, and everything here will be pushed back by 3 months instantly. Of course, you can go back here and you can see that instead of starting in February, your marketing campaign starts in May. And if you're happy with these changes, now you can merge it in like a pull request. And that's it. So, I mean, there's a lot more to show. We support HR systems. You can create databases. But I'm going to pause there. And that hopefully that gives you a better view on what is possible and how you can make planning a lot more accessible to you and the rest of your company, so they actually understand how the business works.
Thanks, Siki. I'm gonna throw a poll in the into Livestorm here. We're curious from our audience after watching what Siki just shared, how you would describe your what if scenario modeling process today. Obviously, I previewed what typical companies do. Siki just showed what best-in-class companies are doing. So how would you describe your what if scenario modeling processes today? And as we do that, I'm going to take back the screen, and Scott's going to take it from here.
Okay, cool. I'll just give people a second to fill out that poll. That'd be interesting information. So just first of all, thanks, Siki. And I got to tell you, every time I see this, it's just so exciting to me because I have spent, I don't know, the last 15 years building these very detailed plans for my companies, right? And doing it all in spreadsheets. And I'm fairly facile with the spreadsheets, but it's just doing the what if, I want to push this back a quarter. I mean, it's just so painful. It's clear to me that this is going to not just save the time of the people that would be building out these models, but because of the nature, the real-time nature of being able to do this, it actually does help to foster the conversation and the collaboration of the leadership team. So I think it's phenomenal. So good stuff there.
Yeah, so far we've got over 80% saying we plan and model carefully, but it's manual, slow, and never in real time. So it's probably what we expected.
Yeah, you're not alone.
So, of course, in order to accurately scenario plan and know how increasing marketing spend or delaying sales hires will impact cash, runway, ARR, et cetera, you've got to be able to build high confidence models, right? Which is what the Runway platform is doing. But you can only do that if you've got solid actual historical data to inform those models. I think, Siki, you've mentioned before that your sort of litmus test on whether customers are a good fit is whether they've got kind of mature enough actual data in there to begin with. And AI doesn't solve this because AI can only infer models if there's high confidence data to train it on. And when it comes to modeling go-to-market engines, we're talking about things like historical data of full funnel conversion rates and sales cycle times by channel, by segment, by salesperson, right? In order to trust that something like Runway is modeling accurately, and it's not just a pretty or easy way to plan based on suspect underlying data. And this is where most growth companies and mid-market companies fall way short. So let's talk about how do you get that? How do you get to where you've got great actual data, or at least sufficiently good actual data to make the more automated modeling and planning activities go better? So the first thing you need to do is make sure you're measuring the right stuff. We refer to this as the data strategy and associated instrumentation. And the word strategy here is very important because it distinguishes it from the more typical reactive ad hoc approach of basically adding another field to your CRM every time you realize that there's a certain question you can't answer. Getting the data strategy right is an absolute must for any of the rest of this to work. But it's not super easy, and it requires very thoughtful work. And at Scale Matters, we actually have developed a framework that we use with our customers. We call it Data Drives Action, but it basically provides an approach to getting the data strategy right for our customers. And I'll just tell you a little bit about it so that you can kind of use the same concepts in your own companies. And if you want to learn more, there's actually a webinar we did a couple of months ago. You could find it on our website. It's called How to Get Go-to-Market Performance Reporting on the Same Playing Field as Financial Reporting. Anyway, gist of it is this. There's a certain set of, or finite set of actions, right, that you could take to improve go-to-market outcomes. Perhaps streamlining your sales process or changing the allocation of your marketing investments from, let's say, Google ads to linked ads. And there's a lot of actions you can take, right? But it is finite. So given this superset of actions that you could take, you then need to have insights that would inform you to take one set of actions versus another, right? That's the whole point of this data. The value of data is to help inform you about what you're going to do to improve outcomes. And we talk about it as insights, but said another way, it's what questions do you need to be able to answer as a finance leader, sales leader, marketing leader, CS leader, right? What questions do you need to be able to answer that will inform your actions? An example might be, what's the relevant ROI of my different lead sourcing channels? Now, by precisely defining those questions in the framework that we have, or that you can do, it helps you understand then what data do you need to have and how does it need to be presented in order to efficiently answer those questions. So very important to be precise about the questions you need to be able to answer. And then once you know that, right, once you know the data and how it needs to be presented, then it becomes fairly straightforward to say, okay, well, then the CRM and other technology that provides the data needs to be configured in this certain manner, right? And we're going to need process, right? So there will need to be these fields to provide this data. There will need to be these processes in order to reliably populate those fields. And this is what we call instrumentation, right? It's basically a set of configurations of your tech stack as well as processes that come together to produce the data that you need to answer the questions. And just as an FYI, at Scale Matters, we have a software platform as well. One of the things that software platform does is automates the instrumentation that's required to support full funnel analytics. So first thing is you got to get your data strategy and instrumentation right. But it's not good enough to define a data strategy and build out the right instrumentation as long as the instrumentation has some dependency on humans, right? Either to enter data into the CRM or maybe RevOps people who are building automations that are meant to create the data. There are going to be data errors. And it's important to have a commitment to data hygiene that ensures that the integrity of the data is sufficient to make it worthwhile to analyze, right? Either to answer key business questions or to inform models like Runway, right? Again, if you let your data integrity deteriorate, which it always will, as long as there's humans involved in this stuff, you can't use it to inform your actions or to inform models you would build. So it's an absolute mandate that you commit to data hygiene, data integrity. The way this commitment typically translates is into some monitoring, like continuous data hygiene monitoring, right? So that you're always looking for problems. You also need emphasis from the leadership teams that data hygiene and following processes, et cetera, is important. It's, or it just won't, it'll come off as lip service. So just also here again, Scale Matters software, part of the thing it does is automates the data hygiene monitoring. So we do a lot of work with our customers trying to get this underlying data really in good shape. But once you have good data, then you need to analyze it. Either, again, to draw actionable insights from it or to build models from it. And we see many folks fall short on presenting data in a way that would be efficient to conclude insights or actions from. I mean, they've got dozens or even hundreds of CRM dashboards and reports, as well as spreadsheets, and yet most companies we go into, they say, here's all the stuff we look at, but nothing jumps out as actionable. And that's because it wasn't designed for actionability. So how do you do this? Well, the simple rule of thumb is, if you know there is a key business question you need to be able to answer, then, as I said with the framework, then identify the data you need and the way you need it to be presented in order to make it efficient to answer the question. Again, this is what our Data Drives Action framework helps our customers with. Let me now just walk you through an example so you know what it looks like to have actionable data, if you will. Dan, could you pull up the, yeah, there you go. So this is basically a panel. We call it an insight panel in our software. And it's not important that it's our software, because you can, if you have your data right, you can build the visualizations and the presentation of data in whatever BI tools you want to do it in, right? But the point is that you build the data and the presentations to answer these questions. And this is an example. This customer is trying to sort of understand, how can they improve overall conversion rates? Very simple question, which is, where do I have the biggest leakage, right? Which part of my overall funnel, from leads into initial discovery meetings, into opportunities and pipeline, where do I have my biggest leakage, and what's the root cause behind it? And the way this data is presented, where we're showing sort of actual data, conversion rate data relative to what was planned, it was very clear. And if you scroll down a little bit, Dan, it was very clear that their biggest conversion rate leakage was at this point of converting leads into initial discovery meetings set. So we identified this point, relative to the context of plan. And then the rest of this panel is meant to help articulate why, right? The root cause behind the leakage. And so the way the data is presented, it first says, okay, is this specific to one channel versus another, right? So if you think about systematic analysis, you would find your leakage point, and then you want to say, okay, is it systemic? Is it channel specific? Is it sales team specific? Is it something else? And that's exactly how this data is presented. So in this case, it first looks at the channel correlation. And in fact, it sort of identified that there was basically some very low conversion on the event spend. So these guys spent a fair amount of money producing a whole lot of these leads from two different types of events. And you can see those over on the right-hand bars of the left-hand chart. But then if you look at the conversion rates of those on the right-hand chart, it's terrible, right? So lots of leads, none of them converting, a lot of money going there. And then the data went on, the analysis goes on, if you scroll down just a little bit more, Dan, to look at the correlation by teams and then by segments, et cetera. So again, we don't need to spend any more time on this, but the point is, you need to present your data so that it can be efficiently analyzed. And we have found that tying it to the questions you need to be able to answer makes that job really easy. So if you go back to the slide where Dan had the 3 parts, that basically the before part, you can go down to the in the good state, not the bad state. Yeah, this part is made simple if you get your data right and get it presented in the same fashion that I just told you, which is this whole notion of design for actionability. So I'll stop there. Hopefully you got a good sense of the agility of decision making when you have a great modeling and planning environment like Runway provides, but also the importance of having the underlying data, historical data, be not only high quality, but efficiently able to be analyzed.
Thanks, Scott. And we got some questions in here in the chat. We're going to get to those here in a second. We just threw out one final poll of the 3 go-to-market data requirements that Scott just walked through. Which one is currently the biggest struggle for your business? We'd love to hear about that, to understand where people are at. As we continue on here, as we wrap up here, let's go through some questions. So it looks like Cal has been going back and forth in the chat with some of the questions there. How about Eli asked, Siki, can you share your insights on the value of integrating a product team into the operating model? What does this look like in practice? Yeah, go ahead.
So the kind of interesting thing is my background is in product. And so if you look at a data-driven product team, like most product teams increasingly are, for example, Zynga, people kind of forget that product teams do have their own models oftentimes. The growth team has their own model. The marketing team has their own model. And these models are very important because you need to be able to time travel into the future effectively and understand the impact of the decisions that you make today. Like, what do you work on first and why? And so it's not so much that you need to integrate the product team into an operating model. The model already exists. The problem is it's not connected with the main finance model. The finance team has their own model. And when you have these 2 different views of the world that no one sees, that's when you get misalignment. And so the value is having one aligned source of truth in terms of how does a company work. And this is not true of just a product team, but almost every other department.
Another question here. What are the biggest friction points you've seen in getting teams shift from manual spreadsheet-based planning to automated systems? Are there behavioral or organizational challenges that tech alone can't solve?
Yeah, this is like probably the most common question we get. And by and large, we see a surprisingly a small number of people who, really struggle who want to stay on a spreadsheet. And the reason is because these spreadsheets, they are coming to us with known pains, right? The pain of getting of keeping the spreadsheet up to date, of having the other parts of the company understand how the business works at all. And so one of our beliefs is that to a surprising extent, the behavior of an organization is informed by the tools that they use, more so that the tools that they adopt is driven by the culture of the team. And we've seen this in the past with like other domains like design and data. For example, before tools like Mixpanel Amplitude, it was considered rude to, you couldn't really get access to this data that is locked down in data warehouses. But as these tools made it accessible, now we take it for granted that everyone in the company has access to this data. The same is true of better finance tools.
Yeah, I'd say the key word that comes to mind there in terms of getting through organizational resistance, if there is any, both on the planning side, but also in getting your data right, is alignment, right? And we see a strong correlation between companies where the very top leadership, particularly CEO and CFO, understand that the way to get efficient growth is to create better alignment across the organizational functions. And so if the culture is driving for that, very easy to see their willingness to invest in these changes, both transformational changes on the data side, but then also on the planning side. If the culture and particularly the CEO allows each of the people under her to just run wild in their own silos. They're not ready for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I want to echo what Scott said, because I think that's true too. So, one of the things we explicitly look for is what we call the data-driven finance team, and we have this saying like, what is finance? Finance is not just accounting, but in the future, right? So if the culture of a team sees finance mostly about, like setting budgets from the top down and making these trade-off decisions from the top down versus understanding the causal drivers of the business, I think those are the challenges that make adoption of something like this more or less challenging.
So let's see, who usually builds models? Financial, non-financial, or both areas? I think this is about in Runway. What is the learning curve for someone to learn to build a model, financial versus non-financial people?
Yeah. So usually we start with a finance owner. So that's our wedge into the rest of the company. But we often quickly see is that because of how accessible it looks and how familiar it seems to other products that have used their consumer grade, we quickly see other departments are using it. Usually it starts with a sales leader and often also a marketing leader. So the interesting thing is because we connect to all of these other sources of data, you can replace you can have your marketing model and forecast right in Runway with connected to data. And the learning curve, I mean, it varies. We do have white glove onboarding, so people can pick it up in a couple of days. But we've also seen customers get started even before the very first kickoff meeting, because we really spend a lot of time designing it to be as intuitive as possible.
Awesome. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's anything else I missed. Someone just asked, with the plan aspect of the operating model, doesn't this give the edge for AI since it would have so much context?
Yes, that is getting ahead of roadmap, but yeah, I think one of the things that obviously makes AI a lot more useful is as much context as possible. And the interesting thing about a finance model is that it sees, in order to be accurate, it has to see everything, every source of data, every department, every plan, every person in the company. And so, yes, that is true.
Excellent. We'll leave the chat open for another minute or so. I just want to go through the two offers we have for everyone in the audience. Runway is offering 1 month free of the platform, but you've got to sign up with this link, runway.com/SM. And then Scale Matters wants to invite you to take this 10-question assessment on our website. It's go-to-market reporting health check. It grades you on how confident you are in your ability to answer the most critical go-to-market operational questions. And then after you fill it out, it's just 10 questions. It takes just a couple of minutes. You'll get some personalized feedback on what changes you can make and how to implement them to turn your go-to-market reporting into a actionable tool for decision-making. So,
yeah, I mean, I just want to give a quick plug for you guys because, we work with companies specifically that have good data. And I think what you focus on is really, really important. And a lot of companies find it very time consuming to get that good data. So this is why I think it's been a great event to have with you and continue to work together.
Yeah. How would you describe the level of data maturity companies need to have to actually use Runway?
Yeah, I mean, all the things that Scott said, right? You need to have things instrumented, and the hygiene needs to be pretty good. You need to be operating in a sort of data-driven way. You understand causal drivers of your business, and they're well instrumented, and that can be difficult, and it can take 1 or 2 full-time people to make sure that's good, or you can work with a partner like you guys. So I think what you're doing is quite valuable, especially for someone who wants to use Runway.
Appreciate that. Not to plug us, but to plug the concept of having good data. With AI steamrolling the world like it is, the companies that have good data are the ones that are going to be able to leverage this. So if your boards are pressuring you for efficient growth and you're starting to see some of the early use cases of how AI can drive efficiency, step number 1 is put some energy into a good data foundation.
Yeah, to be clear, we don't actually work with customers that don't have good data, so it's like a kind of a disqualifying thing for us.
Awesome. Well, we're 10 minutes over. Appreciate everyone who stayed a little bit extra time. And thanks, Siki and Cal over at Runway for partnering with us on this webinar. As I dropped in the chat earlier, this webinar recording is going to be available for on-demand replay. As soon as this webinar wraps up, you'll get an email with a link to that. If you want to share it, feel free, or catch anything in this webinar again. And just appreciate everyone coming today. We'll be in touch with future webinars in our Bridging the Gap Between Finance and Go-to-Market series. Hope everyone has a great rest of your Thursday and a great rest of your week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Siki.
Thank you. Bye-bye.